All right, let's get right into it. If you drive in South Florida, you know the roads can be, well, chaotic. Today, we're tackling the one question that pops into everyone's head after an accident. What is my case actually worth? We're going to break down the laws, the real numbers, and all the hidden stuff you absolutely need to know.
Look, after the shock of a crash, this is it. This is the question. And let's be real, it's not about greed. It's about survival. It's about figuring out how you're going to pay the hospital, cover your rent when you can't work, and just get your life back on track. You need a real answer, not some random number from an online calculator. To really get what's going on with these cases, you first have to understand the environment. This quote pretty much nails it, doesn't it? If you've ever driven on I-95 during rush hour, you know it's a battle. That chaos, that's the backdrop for every single car accident claim in Miami.
So, to get you some clarity, here's our game plan. We'll start with that big question. Then we'll walk through Florida's kind of unique no-fault system. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what really drives the value of a case, talk about the big insurance catch, the ticking clock you can't ignore, and then wrap it all up with the key things you gotta remember. Okay, first things first, let's just bust a huge myth right now. You've probably seen those websites that promise to tell you the average settlement. Come on, that's totally misleading. It's like averaging the value of a fender bender with a multi-million-dollar catastrophic injury case. The number you get is completely useless. The real value is always, always in the specific details of your story.
All right, so where do we even begin? Well, it all starts with Florida's no-fault system. You have to understand this because it's the mandatory first step for every single person who gets into a crash here. At the heart of this system is something called personal injury protection, or as everyone calls it, PIP. Now, the most important thing to get here is that this is your insurance. It doesn't matter who was at fault for the accident, you turn to your own PIP coverage first to get your initial bills paid. So what does this PIP coverage actually get you? Well, it's up to $10,000. It'll pay 80% of your medical bills and 60% of your lost wages. But, and this is a huge but, notice what it doesn't cover. It gives you zero for your pain and suffering, and it does nothing to fix your car. Those are completely separate battles. So you're probably wondering, if PIP doesn't cover pain and suffering, how does anyone ever get paid for that? Well, that's where Florida's serious injury threshold comes into play. Just think of it like a legal gateway. Your injury has to be significant enough, think permanent, to let you step outside that basic no-fault system and actually make a claim for the human cost of what happened. Okay, now that we've got the basic rules down, let's get to the main event. What's the difference between a case worth a few $1,000s and one worth millions? It really just boils down to three things: how bad your injury is, what kinds of damages you can claim, and, of course, who was at fault. Let's start with the most common stuff. We're talking about soft tissue injuries. Whiplash from a rear-end collision, a bad sprain. These hurt, for sure, and they mess up your life for a while, but they're generally temporary. The settlement range, you'll see, usually reflects that. Now we're leveling up. This is where you get into more serious territory, like broken bones or a herniated disc that requires surgery. These are the kinds of injuries that often push a case over that serious injury threshold we just talked about, which opens the door to getting compensated for your pain and suffering. And then you have the truly devastating injuries, the ones that change a person's life forever. A traumatic brain injury, paralysis, things like that. The value here accounts for a lifetime of medical needs and loss potential. The numbers can get huge, but as we're about to see, there's one really big catch. This chart really lays it all out and puts it into perspective. You can clearly see how the potential value just climbs right alongside the severity of the injury. It goes all the way from the disruption of a sprain to the absolute tragedy of a wrongful death claim. So, what are these settlement numbers actually made of? Think of it in two buckets. You've got economic damages, that's the black and white stuff, the hospital bills, the lost paychecks, all the things you can add up with a calculator. But then you have non-economic damages. That's the human cost, the pain, the anxiety, not being able to play with your kids anymore. And in any serious case, that's often the biggest piece of the puzzle. Now for a rule that can shrink your settlement or just wipe it out completely. This is a big deal, a change that happened in 2023. Florida now has a super strict rule about fault. The bottom line is this: if you are found to be more than 50% responsible for the crash, even just 51%, you get zero, nothing. And you can see just how brutal this rule is right here. If a jury says you're 40% at fault, okay, your payout gets reduced by 40%. But the second you cross that line to 51% at fault, bam, it drops off a cliff, straight to zero. It's a total all-or-nothing system.
So let's say you've got it all. You have a really severe injury and you are 100% not at fault. Your case has got to be worth a fortune, right? Well, not so fast. There's one final massive catch that puts a ceiling on almost every single case out there.
And this is it. This is the cold, hard truth of personal injury law. A case is only worth what you can actually collect. Your injuries might be valued at $1 million, but if the driver who hit you only has a $25,000 insurance policy, well, that's often the absolute maximum you can ever hope to recover.
Okay, so on top of the injuries, the fault, and the insurance, there's one more thing, an absolute non-negotiable deadline. If you miss this, nothing else we've talked about even matters.
It really is this simple. For any accident after March 24th, 2023, a stopwatch starts the moment of the crash. From that day, you have exactly 2 years to file a lawsuit. Not 2 years and a day, 2 years. If you miss that deadline, your right to make a claim is gone forever.
Phew, we have covered a ton of ground, I know. We've gone from PIP insurance all the way to fault rules and these critical deadlines. So let's just boil it all down into one final checklist of the things you absolutely have to know.
Here it is, your final cheat sheet. Number 1, forget online averages. Your case value is completely unique. 2, that 2-year deadline isn't a suggestion, it's a cliff. 3, if you're more than half at fault, you get nothing. 4, you have to prove a serious injury to get paid for your suffering. And last, but definitely not least, the amount of insurance available is almost always the real-world limit on your recovery.
So we've just navigated the entire legal maze for Miami car accident claims. Understanding these rules, from fault percentages to insurance caps, is absolutely your first and best defense. It's a complicated system for sure, but now you've got the map. The only question left is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?